Right now, in every Catholic church on earth, there's a statue of a woman standing on a serpent. Most people walk past it without knowing why. Catholics believe something happened to this woman before she was even born that no other human being has ever experienced. It was not a blessing given later in life. It was a moment, an exact instant at the first second of her existence when grace entered her soul before sin ever could. Theologians call it the Immaculate Conception, and most people, even many Catholics, get it completely wrong. I am Father Felix. Stay with me as we dig deeper. Most people think the Immaculate Conception is about Jesus, but the first thing to know is that it's about Mary. So let's clear up the most common mistake. If you ask someone on the street what the Immaculate Conception means, they'll probably tell you it means Jesus was conceived without a human father. But that's the virgin birth, which is a completely different doctrine. The confusion is so widespread that even news outlets and movies get it wrong. Interestingly, HuffPost ran a piece about the mistake, and they were right to call it out. Most Catholics walking into church on a Sunday would probably give you the wrong answer too, and there's no shame in that. The words simply sound like they should mean something else, and our brains fill in the gap with the only miracle we can remember. The statue you see in almost every Catholic church shows Mary standing on a serpent, her foot pressing down on the creature that brought sin into the world. That image comes from the book of Genesis, where God tells the serpent that a woman will crush its head. Catholics have long seen Mary as that woman, the one who would reverse what Eve had done. But the statue isn't just a decoration or a pretty image of a saint. It's a reminder of something that happened at the very first moment Mary existed. And that's where the story gets precise. Part of the problem is the words themselves. Immaculate Conception sounds like it should describe the conception of Jesus, because that's the only miraculous conception most people have heard of. But the church has always been careful with language, and in this case, the precision matters. The Immaculate Conception is about Mary's conception in her mother's womb. It's about the very beginning of her life, not the beginning of Jesus's. The title of this video promises you an exact moment, and the church actually delivers on that promise. Most people assume the Immaculate Conception is a vague, poetic idea about Mary being special, but it isn't. Catholic doctrine offers something far more specific. There was a clock tick instant when Mary came into being, and in that same instant, something happened that had never happened to any other human being. To understand what that was, we have to go back to a winter day in Rome, when a pope stood before the world and used language so precise that it can still take your breath away. On December 8th, 1854, Pope Pius IX stood in St. Peter's Basilica and defined the dogma in a document called Ineffabilis Deus. He didn't use vague language. Instead, he declared that Mary was preserved from all stain of original sin in the first instant of her conception. Think about what that means. There was a fraction of a second when Mary came into being as a human person, and grace was already waiting there. Sin never had a chance to touch her. This wasn't a new idea that the Pope invented. The belief had been growing in the church for centuries. By the time Pius IX surveyed the bishops of the world in 1849, the overwhelming majority were already in favor of defining it. So on that December morning, the Pope was doing something remarkable. He took a truth that Catholics had long held in their hearts and gave it the clearest, most precise wording possible. The grace Mary received is what theologians call prevenient. That means it arrived before she could do anything to deserve it. It came in view of the future merits of Jesus Christ. Mary was saved by the cross, just like you and me, but the grace of her Son reached her before she ever needed it. She was preserved, not because she was strong on her own, but because God applied the redemption of Christ to her at the earliest possible moment. It's as if the doctor arrived with the cure before the disease could even take hold. This is what makes her unique in all of human history. Every other person born into the world inherits the spiritual wound we call original sin. It's like being born into a house where the foundation is cracked. You didn't cause the crack, but you live with it. Mary alone was preserved from that crack at the very first instant. Her foundation was sound from the beginning. No one else can say that, and the church is careful about the wording here. The Pope didn't say Mary was cleansed of sin after the fact. He said she was preserved from it. The difference matters. Cleansing means sin was there and then removed. Preservation means sin never touched her. From the first instant of her existence, grace had already taken hold. There was no gap, no delay, no moment when she was without it. The very first heartbeat of her life kept time with God's grace. But here's where it gets interesting. The church doesn't merely say this happened. It says why it had to happen this way. The question of why God chose this path has puzzled believers for centuries. The church never claims the Immaculate Conception was absolutely necessary. It says it was fitting, but it was fitting in the most profound way. The early church fathers saw Mary as the new Eve. Eve had been created without sin, and through her disobedience, sin entered the world. Mary, through her obedience, would open the door for the Savior. If Mary was to reverse what Eve did, it made sense that she should stand where Eve stood, free from sin, ready to say yes. The church fathers Justin Martyr and Irenaeus Both taught this in the 2nd century, long before the dogma was formally defined. They looked at Mary and saw the reversal of the fall. There's also the biblical hints that Catholics have always noticed. In Luke's gospel, the angel Gabriel doesn't call Mary by her name when he greets her. He calls her Kekaridomene, which we translate as full of grace. It's not a normal greeting, and it's not something Mary became later. It's a title, a state of being, as if grace was already who she was. The Greek word is so unusual that it almost sounds like a new name. And in a way, it was. The church teaches that Mary was preserved from original sin, not because of anything she earned on her own, but because of the role she would play. She was the Ark of the New Covenant. Just as the ancient Ark held the presence of God and had to be pure, Mary would carry the living God inside her. You don't put the Holy One inside a damaged vessel. The old Ark was made of gold and acacia wood, built with care because it would carry something sacred. Mary was prepared with even greater care because she would carry God himself. Some people ask why God would do this for Mary and not for everyone. The answer is that he did it for Mary so that everyone else could have a savior. Her yes at the Annunciation was only possible because grace had already prepared her heart. She was free to choose, and she chose love. That freedom is what the Immaculate Conception made possible. 4 years after the Pope defined the dogma, something remarkable happened. In 1858, a young girl named Bernadette Suberus saw an apparition in Lourdes, France. When Bernadette asked the woman who she was, the answer came, "I am the Immaculate Conception." The girl didn't know what those words meant. She had to repeat them carefully to remember them. But the church understood. Heaven itself had confirmed what the Pope had declared. A simple peasant girl had become the mouthpiece of a mystery that theologians had debated for centuries. But this doctrine isn't really about Mary, not at its heart. It's about what grace actually is for all of us. The Immaculate Conception reveals something about grace that most of us miss. We tend to think of grace as a reward. You live a good life and eventually grace finds you. But Mary's story says the opposite. Grace reached her at the first second of her existence, before she could pray or do a single good thing, before she even had a mind to receive it. That's what grace is. It's not a paycheck for holiness or a prize for effort. It's a gift that arrives before you could ever earn it. It doesn't wait for you to get your life in order. It doesn't show up after you've proven yourself worthy. Grace is the love of God that gets there first. When Catholics look at that statue of Mary on the Serpent, that's what they see, not merely a woman who is lucky. They're seeing a picture of how God treats every soul. Grace comes first. The healing arrives before the wound can fester. The light turns on before you could have found the switch. Mary is the extreme case, but the principle is universal. Every baptism, every moment of forgiveness, every quiet return to God, all of it is grace that arrived first. We don't climb up to God, he reaches down to us. And the Immaculate Conception is the ultimate proof that grace entered before sin ever could. This is why the doctrine matters so much. It's not just a theological curiosity about Mary. It's a window into the heart of God. He doesn't wait for us to clean ourselves up before he comes near. He enters first, he heals first, he loves first. Think of your own life for a moment. The moments when you felt most loved were probably not the moments when you deserved it most. They were the moments when someone saw you clearly and chose you anyway. That's grace. And the Immaculate Conception tells us that God has been choosing us from the very beginning. It helps to imagine grace as a light that turns on before you knew you were in darkness. You don't stumble toward the switch. The light is already there, waiting for you to open your eyes. That's what happened to Mary at the beginning of her life. And that's what God offers to every soul. The Immaculate Conception is the church's way of saying that grace is never late. It was there at the beginning, and it's here now. So the next time you see that statue or hear someone confuse the Immaculate Conception with the virgin birth, you'll know what the church is really saying. It wasn't a vague blessing, but an exact instance when grace entered before sin ever could. And if that was true for Mary at the first second of her life, perhaps we can trust that grace is nearer to us than we think too. Perhaps it's already there, waiting for us to notice. I hope you'll carry a little of that peace with you today, not as a lesson to memorize, but as a companion for the quiet moments ahead. Sometimes to remember that grace has been bestowed upon us, or perhaps to give another the grace they might need, even if we think they may not deserve it. If you want to explore more of these quiet corners of Catholic history, subscribe and stay with us. Next week, we will explore the meaning of full of grace. There always seems to be another story waiting to be told. I am Father Felix, and thank you for joining. God bless to you and your family.